Hey, it's John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and it's The Entrepreneurial You, the show for dedicated and passionate Caribbean entrepreneurs seeking daily inspiration, brought to you by author, speaker, and award-winning entrepreneur Heneka Watkis-Porter. You must be prepared to ignite.
All right, so for me, it's happy time, right? It's always that time when it's time for the Entrepreneurial You podcast, the podcast that inspires and motivates entrepreneurs by hosting guests like Seth Godin, Lisa Nichols, Les Brown, Johnny Dumas, and a host of others. Of course, I am your host and producer, Heneka Watkis-Porter. So welcome to another interesting episode of the show. Today, we are joined by a phenomenal woman who is an investment banking expert and author of the best-selling book, Homeless to Millionaire. Let me pause to remind you that this episode is brought to you by the Jamaica Stock Exchange, Next Step Digital Services, and Jace Mari Photography. Of course, before we dive in, let's hear it from the Jamaica Stock Exchange.
We needed to raise capital, but our experience with local financial institutions was that they were cautious and slow to act, and interest rates were far too high. We had real concerns about financing our business through outside equity investors and the possibility of interference. Could we get a fair valuation for our business? We had our own ideas about the business and its value. Should I go the traditional route of bank financing, or should I try the Jamaica Stock Exchange? So we made a call and experienced transformation of our business through conversations. I'm John Mafood, CEO of Jamaican Teas, and we're listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange.
Give us a call today at 876-967-3271 to begin your transformation through conversation. We want to see your company listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Today I have joining me someone who is 20 years into a successful career as an investment banker, primarily focused on the financial services industry, after spending 7 years as a financial auditor in public accounting. She is an insurance investment banking expert, advising companies and regulators on mergers and acquisitions, financings, capital strategies, valuation, restructuring, private placements, due diligence, and other transactions. She has developed an in-depth knowledge of all forms of corporate insurance and financial services transactions and finances in the debt and equity markets. She's worked on numerous restructurings, debt and equity offerings, including IPOs, M&A transactions, demutualizations, and regulatory projects in the global life and PC reinsurance and insurance markets, and more broadly in financial services. She has delivered advisory expertise on over 25 billion of insurance transactions. She has a passion for financial literacy and empowerment and has authored the internationally best-selling book, Homeless to Millionaire, 6 Keys to Uplift Your Financial Abundance. Let's make welcome, like drum roll, like when we hear women excelling in these areas, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So let's make welcome Grace Vandercruze. Welcome, welcome, Grace.
Thank you, Heneka. What a wonderful introductions. It's so great to be here. Thank you for having me. I look forward to our dynamic conversation.
And I'm looking forward myself. I'm so inspired just hearing and going through and reviewing and reading your bio. My gosh, I'm inspired. So let's break the ice a little, although we did that on our own, right? So what's the most unusual item on your desk right now, and why is it there?
Yes, right now the most unusual item is this timer. And it reminds me and my husband every day that the most precious resource we have is time. We are given our treasures, our talents, our our treasures and our time being the most precious of which once lost cannot be regained. And so it reminds us every day that maximize our time while we're here.
Wow, you were so ready for this. Like you were so ready. Now, for those who can't see, because we're recording on video, but of course, the podcast is audio only. It is an hourglass, and you know what
Yes.
what came through to my mind is like sand through the hourglass.
Yes.
So are the days of our lives.
Right. Yes. The sands of times, right? It's like so fascinating when we look back at our lives. First of all, time goes by very quickly. The older we get, it's fascinating to me how we have to be intentional about how we break up the 24 hours in a day, because a third of our lives we'll spend just sleeping. A third of our lives we'll spend just getting ready. But the third, the most important third is how we plan those blocks of time, what we do, and how we maximize the time we have here, because time is fleeting and it goes by quickly.
Let's talk about time spent in the financial industry. Usually the stereotypical view is women are not versed in that industry. It's usually the men that excel where money is concerned, banking, finance. So let's talk about your time spent in the financial industry. How did you develop a love for it such that you have expanded and broadened your horizon, doing so many things in the field? Let's talk about that.
Sure. So look, before we even embark on it, there is a Nigerian proverb that I love, and it says, wherever the stream flows, it never forgets its source. And my source is my grandmother, my late grandmother, who had 9 biological children, but she and my granddad had room in their hearts to adopt 5 young sisters who lost their mom. So she raised 14 children. As a result, I am one of 52 grandchildren. And I come from a long line of women who managed their homes with very little resources. And they were mathematicians, they were financial geniuses to make what little they have to spread. And my grandmother, who had very little schooling, but had a PhD in common sense and a great love for me, would hold my hands and say, Grace, you have blessed my eyesight and you have lengthened my years. And growing up with such love from a powerful, impactful woman has given me values that are tremendously embracing and given me a foundation to really move in pioneering fields or sit in boardrooms. I sit on 5 corporate boards. And I credit my grandmother. Her most treasured words to me were, believe beyond your limits. And believe beyond your limits have permeated my life. It has gone with me through the 25 mountain peaks I've climbed on 3 different continents. It has gone with me when I transitioned from public accounting to finance. And I did that transition by going back to business school. I went to Wharton business school. And during my first and second year at my MBA program, I interned at Merrill Lynch and realized I love the dynamic and the complexities of working on transactions. It involves both the science of valuations and calculations, but also the art of dealing with various personalities and dynamics of the transactions and various competing forces, and having all that come together at a table around the transaction was, to me, exceedingly fascinating, very much enlightening, and very energizing for me.
All right. Thanks for sharing that, Grace. Now, the title of your book, Homeless to Millionaire. When I see that, something in me tells me that it's a part of your story without going into the book. So let's talk about being homeless. What are you talking about right there?
Sure. So my parents immigrated from Guyana, came to Brooklyn, New York, to live the American dreams. One of the amazing thing about being part of a diaspora is that the seizing possibilities with passion and just pursuing an education where values ingrained in us. So I went to Pace University for my undergrad in accounting, which is downtown in Manhattan, and I commuted back and forth to my home where I shared with my parents and 6 siblings. I'm second oldest of 7. So I commuted back and forth, and between my second and third year, I went home on June, a beautiful summer's day, only to find that the brownstone apartment that my family and I shared was up in flames. That everything we owned and had considered very precious and dear to us was destroyed that day. My mom had me go back in after the fire trucks and everyone had left to see what I can salvage. And I distinctly remembered that everything we owned that I can grab and salvage, because what wasn't destroyed by fire was definitely destroyed by smoke. Everything we owned fit in a 13-gallon trash bag with room left to spare. But amidst the ashes, my dad was determined that our family stayed together. He always reminded us that when he was 8 years old and was orphaned, the saddest day of his life was when he was separated from his 2 brothers. And so while everyone had a solution for us of why don't you split up into 2s and 3s and go to family and friends until you get yourself together and then come back as a unit, my late dad said, there's no way we're splitting up. And in order for us to be together as a unit, the only place we could go to was a New York City homeless shelter. So a day that began as an ordinary day, going to school and just being a student, ended up with me walking into a homeless shelter with that garbage bag and with all our worldly possessions and sleeping in a shelter. So here is where my grandmother's words became near and dear to me. Because when she told me, believe beyond your limits, she meant that you should never plan your goals based on your current circumstances. In fact, she also told me that your current circumstances do not have the capacity to contain your dreams and visions and your potential, and just pursue them. So I completed my undergraduate degree going back and forth to a homeless shelter. And this is where I tell everyone, believing beyond your limits permeated my life in every single way.
So let's talk about, Grace. Inspiring, interesting story. Let's talk about your thoughts, your feelings, your mindset. That first evening of you walking, just take yourself back. Take our audience with us. Walking into that shelter with that garbage bag of stuff, the little that you could salvage.
Yes.
Let's talk about what that was like.
Well, the walk was a long walk of shock, of dismay, of despair, of how could this possibly be? It was a feeling of numbness. It was walking into a shelter, you instantly have this feeling that I do not belong here. That while I was going to be in this shelter does not belong in me at all. And that my life goal at the moment was to be away from that shelter as much as possible. It served as a motivating factor for me to really think seriously about my education because I was always a serious student. I was always a very good student. But the shock of that all had me, I say, redoubled my focus on finishing school. I remember I went into the school officials. I had 12 credits for the coming semester in the fall. And I told them I'd like to do 18, which was the maximum you can possibly take, because I wanted to make sure that my focus and my time was at the university. And because I had a job at the university as well, the university was more my second home. One can say I spent more time at the university than I did the homeless shelter. And I try to really minimize the time that I spent there because my success and my future was way beyond the shelter. The shelter was just basically a temporary place for me at the time.
And without dwelling here, because this is not the essence of it, our conversation, but I'm just thinking, you're in college, you're in university, and you're doing your classes, you're going back home to a shelter, to a homeless shelter.
Yes.
What are your feelings though? I mean, take us through the
Yes.
emotions
So
that you have during
emotion,
your school years. Yeah.
sure. So in school itself, I was a student. I was still studying. I did my work. I completed my assignment. But the train ride from school to the shelter, I cried a lot. I remember that's when I memorized Maya Angelou's poem, And Still I Rise. Okay, and still I rise. And I began my book with her poem because that poem lived in me. Okay, it reminded me that, regardless of circumstances, I will rise and still I rise. And so, that really became a living and breathing mantra within me that kept me going. I think the real heroes here are my parents because I don't know how you keep a family of 9 together. All of us still remaining in school, all of us still pursuing education. My mom had this devise a plan whereby we would walk in twos and threes from the subway to the shelter and back and forth, so we never were by ourselves. But there was a way of pivoting into a survival mode that we didn't have before, and it required a lot of collaboration and unity and leadership from my parents, and they managed to do it. We talked early, we opened this segment with time and how time is so precious, but also sometimes things take full circle in our lives. And so now when I sit and I talk to insurance companies who are managing billions of transactions, I tell them that I'm not just an advisor to the insurance industry. I tell them I'm a fierce advocate for financial security and financial products, and I have a passion for what they do because coming out of that shelter, I know the importance of what insurance means and having a safety net for families because I strongly believe in financial security. I strongly believe in a financial safety net for not us individually, but as a family and for our communities. And I love the way that my career and what my work, both entrepreneurial and my board work, fits in very nicely with my passion that's embedded in my experience that I've had.
Yeah, lovely, lovely story. And I love how you brought in that message of the importance of financial security. Let's talk a little bit about that and how insurance plays, how much of a role it plays in, generational wealth and security. Let's talk a little bit about that because I'm anxious to get into the book some more.
Okay, so in my book, The 6 Financial Pillars of Financial Abundance, a key pillar is insurance. Why? You mentioned it. It gives us this security. And what's really, really interesting, first of all, with financial literacy, we all have our tablets and our keyboards and, this advanced technology. But in spite of all of that, financial literacy worldwide is going down. It is not increasing. And I think we have to be intentional of telling people, here are some of the tools and the resources. What's interesting is that the risk of our lives have increased and will continue to increase exponentially. From everything from climate change, which most of us live along coast or along coastal areas and along storm areas. And are we adequately insured from a property perspective that covers everything from theft and floods and a hurricane, wind damage? Because catastrophes are intensifying every single year. There are countries that exist today that will be decimated, completely decimated from the face of the earth in 10 to 20 years, completely. It's already, we know this, they're in the path of a hurricane. They're one hurricane from disaster. They're one hurricane from extinction. The same exists for some of our homes. I grew up and people say things like, but for the grace of God, I'm one paycheck away from homelessness and so forth. But what I think we should do is find ways to ensure that the wealth we've created is protected and multiply. So protection is where insurance comes in. Also for our lives, life insurance is the simplest way to pass wealth from one generation to the next. Life insurance goes to the next generation tax-free, absolutely tax-free. And I'm amazed that when someone dies, I hear this GoFundMe page that's set up to cover the funds, the funeral, when life insurance can really help that, plus leaves a major cushion to the next generation, especially for women, where our biggest risk is that we will outlive our savings because we are living longer. One insurance type of insurance that's completely ignored is long-term care insurance, because we will need care, not just we think of medical insurance because it's part of what some employers offer, but it's the long-term care insurance. My mom right now is in hospice, and every time I call to get some services, they ask, does she have long-term care insurance? Does she have long-term care insurance? It's so important. So please don't overlook that. So I'll pause there for now, see if you have any questions, but I think those are the basics of the insurance.
Yeah, thank you for hitting those nails right on the head, Grace. We want to go back. We started touching on the book and you even went there a little bit, but we want to go back to your internationally best-selling book, Homeless to Millionaire: 6 Keys to Uplift Your Financial Abundance. What inspired your writing this book to begin with?
Sure. So I've always been called to speak to women's group, community organization, high schools, college. Could you work on Wall Street as a major managing director? Can you come in and speak? And I always find the audience were fascinated with what I have to say. And I wanted to leave something back for my audience. Wanted to leave a book that has over 140 resources that they can flip back and use, and tools that they can use. So I wanted to leave a roadmap. However, because I'm constantly traveling and working, it was very difficult for me to sit down and type out a book, and very daunting. And I found a publisher who said, look, if you record your book the way you would record it if you're speaking to audiences, we'll transcribe it. We'll have various, we worked on an outline, and I recorded my book. Some of my recordings were in airports and various locations, but I recorded my book, I sent it in, they transcribed it. I then started, they edited it, and I did some editing. And we were working on, the editing phase when COVID hit. And so when COVID hit, of course, we all got, our attention got redirected. However, when the George Floyd incident occurred, and we saw that video over and over again, and to this day, I could never watch that video start to finish, and I probably never will. But it was so impactful. One day I was sitting and just hearing the drumbeat of the constant messages. And I realized that George Floyd's story began as an economic story. That here's a man who went in to give a $20 bill, that was questioned, and his life untangled from there. And I called my publisher and said, publish this book. I wanted us to use that time to talk about economic empowerment. And that's when my book was published, during COVID.
Right. So out of every adversity, every dilemma, every challenge comes an opportunity.
Yes.
And you leverage that time to teach.
Yes.
So in your teaching, you've mentioned a few before, but let's talk about some of those main points, those salient points that you want your reader to walk away with.
Sure. One of the key things is, let's go back to the beginning. The reason why I say this is I have taught financial empowerment to many audiences, and I would go back the next year, and the ones who listened with great interest, and I said, what action have you taken? And they've taken nothing. They've done nothing, but they're still very, very interested. And I realized there's something that's paralyzing us from taking action. And one of the key things is, what is your first money memory? All of us have a money history. If you look at ethnic groups, you look at countries, you look at families, you look at individuals, everyone have a history of money, okay? And we tend to do an inventory and our assessment of our medical history, but then we forget our money history. When we look at our money history, we will find that our money history have been tarnished by theft, lack of payments, lack of adequate payments, promises made, promises not kept. It's been tarnished by fraud, or the uncle that never paid back the money to my parents, or my parents lost their job and all of a suddenly we're facing foreclosure, or something. And many of us not realizing it, we are suffering from financial PTSD. And I must submit to you, unless you look at this very carefully, analyze it, realize what your first money memory is, and address the financial PTSD, there's no amount of financial wisdom that you hear will penetrate you enough to take action. So my book walked through, and I give my own first money memory as an example. And my first money memory, there was embedded in that was scarcity, lack, a shame of what we didn't have, and in a sense, some denial going on and also joking about, to cover up the shame of what we didn't have. It's a powerful story in my book called The Black Milk, in how my mom, in a very dignified way, handled the lack of milk that we did not have. And it was my first money memory. So we walked through that. And there I talk about, it is time for us to create a new money story in our lives. And so I believe in as much as I love and I will give you some great financial tips. And I love the financial tips, but unless you go to the foundation and deal with the money history and recreating your money story, it is time for us to tell ourselves a new story. And what is our money story? And we do this with vision boards. We do this with our own personal values that we reassess, but many times it does not involve money. And we talk more about sex than we do money as a society. We talk more about, drive, so many other things than money. And so, money is so critically important. So that's what we dealt with in that first book. And I walked through money myths and the truths about money that we have to address. Some of them come from churches, they come from playgrounds, they come from things our family says, but it's a new day for us to relook at this. And I submit to you, we live in a world of abundance, and wealth is your birthright. Claim it. Claim it.
All right. Wealth is your birthright. Did you hear her? Did you hear Grace, my listener? Yes, wealth is your birthright. Claim it. On this note, we are going to be moving right into our community connection segment. And this is where we invite you to give feedback, ask a question, give a review, your testimonials, or whatever it is that you want to share. This is your segment, and it is brought to you by Heneka, Watkis-Porter.com. Now, today's feedback question comes from Bert Villarreal. I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Bert Villarreal on LinkedIn. And this question is for you, Grace. How can the younger generation under 30 prepare for retirement and create lifetime income as present retirees have?
I love the question because the earlier you start, the better. And one of the most powerful forces in the world, as Albert Einstein said, is the power of compounding. Because you can double, triple your money, quadruple, on and on and on by compounding and the impact compounding has. So start early, and you don't have to start with a lot. Even if you have $50, $100, whatever you have, just start, because every time you accumulate interest on that money, it continues to double. It continues over time. So I would say be consistent. If your company has a 401k, participate, maximize it. I have in my book stock tips of companies that you use. We all use them. Companies that will continue to thrive regardless of what happens in the economic environment. Learn what those are, invest in those companies, but by all means, keep educating yourself. Keep understanding more about wealth and embrace it. And so thank you for that question.
All right, awesome sauce, and thanks for your response. Now let's get into hearing your final thoughts, Grace, as we are on the winding up of our conversation. We want to hear your final thoughts, whether it is something from your book or whatever it is you want to leave our audience with, as well as your contact information. How might my listeners get in touch with you?
Sure. So my final thought is that it's not too early to think of our legacy. And our legacy is based on what we leave behind for the next generation. And I have a strong desire to educate and leave behind a pattern of wealth, whether it be scholarship funds, life insurance, or whatever I have to leave behind so that the next generation comes up and they benefit from what I have. And I do want to applaud your audience for participating in this program, because it is your legacy that counts.
Right. And how may they reach you?
Yes. So they may reach me by graceglobalcapital.com. That's my business, Grace Global Capital. And regarding my book and all of the master classes associated with my book, you can tune into that with www.financialabundancewithgrace.com.
I like it a lot. Financial abundance with grace. All right.
And of
Let's,
course,
and
my book
yes,
is on Amazon as well.
absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Grace. We come stick and stay with us a little more. Let's get into our trending now segment brought to you by Next Step Digital. Need help with digital marketing? Next Step Digital Solutions offers comprehensive services from social media marketing to SEO mastery, helping your business thrive online. Visit trynextstep.com or email service@trynextstep.com or call 876-570-1769 to learn more. And here is what's trending now: financial literacy and empowerment. In the realm of financial services, financial literacy and empowerment are trending topics gaining significant traction globally. A recent survey by the Global Financial Literacy Excellence Center revealed that only 33% of adults worldwide are financially literate, underscoring the urgent need for enhanced financial education. This trend aligns with the rise of financial literacy programs and resources aiming to bridge this knowledge gap. Notably, women and young adults are increasingly seeking financial education, with a 45% rise in enrollment in online financial literacy courses over the past 2 years. And this is great news, and that's what's trending now. All right, I want to at this time extend my gratitude again to Grace Vandercruze for enlightening us with her deep knowledge and inspiring journey. Thank you so much, Grace.
Absolutely. Thank you, Heneka, for inviting me here. I think no more important topic than financial empowerment, and so glad to be able to share with you and your audience.
Oh, absolutely. And my listener, make sure you check out Grace's book and follow her incredible work in the financial services sector. She did share how you may get in touch with her. And I want to just say overall, thank you for tuning into this episode of The Entrepreneurial You. If you enjoy the show, then by all means, make sure that you subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, leave a rating and review, share it with your friends. Until next episode, I invite you to visit the website at Watkis-Porter.com, where you have a free ebook waiting for you on how to conduct podcast interviews like a pro. Yeah, go check it out. Remember to send me your feedback at Heneka at Watkis-Porter.com. And finally, I invite you to affirm with me today: I am financially savvy and capable of making informed strategic decisions. Do take care.